Hi, everyone. I'm very excited for this next session. With me, I have two luminaries in the industry, Brett Queener and Scott Biecek. Brett Queener is a managing director at Bonfire Ventures. He started his software career at Siebel Systems, helping build a juggernaut of alliances and marketing organizations in the on-prem world. He then decamped to Salesforce, where he did an amazing job at failing upwards, his words, not mine, for 12 years, running RevOps, then product, then leading several of their larger acquired business units. Brett then tested his pre-revenue entrepreneurial mettle and lived the hard things about hard things as COO of Smart Recruiters, which has subsequently become a unicorn. And Scott Biecek is a partner at Norwest Venture Partners, where he focuses on early to late stage investment opportunities in enterprise SaaS, with a particular interest in companies building next-gen systems of intelligence and automation across e-commerce, sales, pipeline acceleration, customer service, sales enablement, and CRM. And so with that, what I'd like to do is kick this over to Brett with my first question, which is the concept of AI workers. It feels really new. And Brett, I was wondering if you could tell us how you define AI workers and what they are.
So I have done about 45 interviews over the last 3 months, about to publish, hopefully, what are some seminal pieces. But so much is changing. And so within that construct, the way I think about workers, I have two camps of workers. One, what I call a digital assistant. And the way I think about a digital assistant is, think about it replacing the software you use today, right? Software that you use today has a bunch of tabs that you hunt and peck across, and in your head, you have to translate what you want to do to learning how the application works and making that happen. And what's really exciting about using language with digital assistants, our employees can be so much more effective when they can just communicate what it is they want to do, what they want to know in their own words. And so that's what I think of digital assistants. And then digital workers, in my mind, are fully autonomous workers. And the way to think about it for those that are old, it's the old way we used to think about automation, stuff that humans had to do, but got automated away. And so these would be people that effectively, digital worker would be something that just, there's a piece of work that you do today that a human actually does that you no longer have to do. And when I talk to founders where, it used to be like, let's think about your org chart over the next 2 years. When are you going to hire these SDRs, AEs, et cetera? The question we're now having is, what is your org chart going to look like in 2 years? And it's going to be a mix of humans using assistants, or we used to call software, and they're going to be digital workers with humans training them. And the really cool thing about digital workers is they have no ego. And they'll tell you where they suck. And they'll say, train me. I'm not very good at this. And so that's where I think the orgs are going. And I think it's going much faster than people recognize.
I think that's a really important topic, the speed at which change is happening right now. And Scott, I would kick this same question over to you. How do you think about AI workers and what they are? You see a lot of companies in, the Norwest portfolio and all the companies pitching to you. What are your thoughts here?
Nowadays, Robert, I think every company thinks of themselves as an AI company in some way, and AI is nothing new. We know that. I mean, we've had neural networks mathematically since the 60s and 70s. But with this latest generation of technology that, really reared its head publicly in November of 2022, now this has unlocked a lot of capabilities to build the type of digital assistants that Brett was alluding to earlier. I think what's happening is that we're moving faster than a lot of us thought, and I think there's a lot of companies, in the Fortune 1000 and beyond, who drastically change their course, or we're being told by their CEOs and other leadership to embrace this new technology. And the early questions were, well, what the heck can we do with it all? If ChatGPT was an example of this, could we use ChatGPT to automate some of the simple tasks that we were doing in our jobs, like writing emails or writing code, or one-dimensional type of tasks, doing a little bit of research here or there? I think the answer was pretty clear. It was yes. But now we're starting to get into this phase in 2024 where we're not just using single-threaded type of digital assistants. Now we're stringing together digital assistants and creating digital AI agents that are now capable of not just doing what you might consider tier one type of work, which is the sort of one-shot, one-and-done type of work to answer a question, but now we're starting to think of second-order type of work, the type of work that you might see a customer service agent doing, or the type of work that an SDR might be doing, where there's a little bit of research involved, there's maybe some insights that they need to derive, and then some action that they need to take. And I think we are now in the AI agent world, and we're quickly moving beyond that into something that we can now, I think, call AI workers, which is going to be, I think, a big unlock for this next generation of technology and productivity for companies.
Scott, you sort of took my next question on already, which you talked a little bit about the timeline and then what's happening with the speed of transition today. Brett, from your perspective and the companies that you're seeing, based on what you saw in the beginning to the products that you're investing now, what's that transition been like?
I was just talking to a guy we all know. Will Moxley used to work at Siebel, ran Sales Cloud at Salesforce, now runs product at AppFolio, $600 million property management software. And instead of replacing what I call a simple CRUD action, right? Create, read, update, delete. If somebody asks something like, hey, is there a storm coming in a certain area? And the answer would be yes. Instead of having to go through the application and query which properties, put some Boolean, then figure out okay, who are the points of contact, what language they speak in, the person can now say, hey, for the hurricane that's coming to Tennessee, can you please just notify everybody there some message of like get out or batten the hatches. Done. From a user perspective, that fundamentally changes the entire way somebody thinks about using that software. And then what does the agent ask? Would you like me to do that for you every single time? We have unchained somebody who has a job to be a property manager from hunting and pecking across an application for this computer or agent, if you will, doing this on their behalf. And when you see that in the orgs, they're stunned, right? Because what is happening is that the software, whether it's an agent or assistant, is actually really helpful to the individual. They don't need to be trained. I don't need to do 6 months of onboarding, right? If the product works in the language to solve whatever problem somebody wants done, what is onboarding? So it's pretty exciting. And I would say what's happening now as orgs start to understand the power of these LLMs, if they have the right architecture, and they've trained these LLMs on their metadata, the ability for these agents, either as an assistant agent to do what we would think of a multi-chain set of CRUD actions, it just does, is mind-blowing. And so I think for our orgs that start to recognize that, we have an interesting word that we use, which is minor miracles. R&D teams are finding minor miracles every 3 weeks. They're like, oh, holy shit, we can do this now? And then when they show that to customers, it just fundamentally changes the value you have as a technology provider, whether it's a worker as an agent, to these organizations. And it also brings up a really interesting budgeting conversation, right? On the assistant, it's going to be measured on, do I make the functional worker that much more productive? And we know that we do. On the worker, it becomes interesting because that's really about replacing payroll spend or redirecting payroll spend you had to higher value activities. And so these are all really new, interesting concepts for the three of us who've been in enterprise software for way too long, that we actually, all the playbooks that we had before, we kind of have to chuck out and be like, wow. So anyways, long answer to a short question, but I have never been more excited in terms of how, we've all been building software to tell companies we're going to make them more productive and more successful, and the end users will love it. It's actually really now possible, and it's super exciting.
Let's pull on that thread a little bit, Scott, because I think this is getting into an area that's really interesting around end users. But why do you think AI workers offer so much potential? What are they really good at? And where do you think they're going to help us the most?
Well, I think one of the first things to keep in mind is that AI workers, we are building and training them to act and behave a lot like human workers. But it's pretty clear that we're not going to replace all human workers anytime soon. So there needs to be a world where we coexist and we work with them. And that's like a form of collaboration. What's interesting about this is that AI workers are going to work with humans, but they're also going to work with other AI workers. And that creates another interesting scenario called orchestration, because AI workers, they speak their own language internally. And so now there's a whole new category of companies that are allowing AI agents and AI workers to work collaboratively among themselves and then also work collaboratively with humans. And so I think the answer to your question is what we're seeing right now is the first generation of AI workers are taking on those tier one tasks. They're taking on tasks like outbound sales outreach, and inbound sales handling of customer leads and customer interest. They're handling tier one customer support, where there may be the top 10 or top 15 questions that get asked repeatedly of a call center agent. They can handle those pretty well. With this, and by the way, the amount of value in just solving those three use cases, and by the way, there's dozens more. You look at the back office and automating tasks like simple accounting tasks, or you look at the idea of closing the books and how you can automate some of those things with some automated CPA like workers. What is going to change the world, I think, is when we start to integrate these workers among the rest of the employees in a company, and watching them interact and making not only the processes more efficient, but actually making us as humans more efficient. Because if we can offload tier one work to these other workers, imagine what that unlocks for us as hopefully tier two, tier three, tier four. I'm mostly speaking for the two of you on these higher order thinking measures, but you can see this is a very real. I think when AI really started to become prolific, there was a real concern. You read it in the news. Oh my gosh, it's going to take over all human knowledge work. Well, that's not what's happening, and it's not going to that's not going to happen. What is going to happen though is it's going to allow us to do higher order work, which tends to be much more interesting. And are there going to be human beings on this planet who get automated by AI workers? Yes, there will be. But guess what? Those people now have an opportunity to learn and grow and have a more enriched and more fulfilling work experience alongside AI workers.
Scott, I really like the way that you're thinking about this. And Brett, I'll pose this question to you as we start looking at this from a broader perspective. What trends are you seeing in this market? And are there particular areas of a business that you've seen where there's been the most influx of AI workers being created, or an area that you're particularly excited about?
I saw a demo the other day that kind of blew me away. You asked about what this stuff is good at. And look, don't call it an agent, but if you look at Gong, if we think about 3 years ago, we didn't do call recordings, right? And now the idea of, Scott, you and I meeting with a founder and taking notes and not having a call recording and not being present on the call, and then having to update our partners and remembering what it was and forgetting to call the founder back, and then you're seen as a bad VC, and then trying to update your, what the hell was that? That's what we all did. You would never not do that now. And so what's very interesting is What is AI really good at that humans aren't good at is looking at large set of data and providing some synthesis. And Gong was sort of our first history of that. But like, if you're a product marketer today, that job has changed dramatically because now I can listen to every call, every conversation, look at all the data, and I can figure out what's resonating, what's not resonating. We don't spend 6 months figuring what an ICP is, right? Like if I'm a product manager now, like there's enough data out there that an agent can tell me based on all this stuff what's going on. So, but like a really cool demo I saw the other day in these agent building and orchestration platforms was you can easily build an agent. I'm a worker and say, I want you to be the customer success worker and you work for me. I'm the CEO. And I want you to just go look at all the customer success stuff and tell me what you think the 10 biggest product issues that we have from our customers. Just tell me. And then you can create one, which is a product agent. Hey, you're the product agent. As I want you to look across Jira tickets and product and tell me like, what are we actually releasing and what do we think is coming out, et cetera. That's kind of interesting. But the one that's really interesting, which is I create an agent and said, you're the meeting agent and I want you to meet the product worker and I want you to meet the customer success worker. And I train the meeting as I want you to figure out for me where these two orgs are most disconnected. And you know what? That data is all there. And it could tell you, oh my God, if you're running a function or you're running a CEO and you spend all your time just trying to figure out where the disconnects from your orgs are, and then if you get promoted or large like Scott and Robert were, where they were like EVPs and presidents, and sometimes they had to go like put a disguise on and go meet with the ICs because once you talk to the VPs and the SVPs and the EVPs, you actually don't know what's going on. That's amazing. So then you as a leader can actually have that information. It's been synthesized, and then you do what you do well, which is problem solve. So like when you do that, it kind of just blows you away, and it's not hard to go do.
I think we're living in a world where data has become so important, and that synthesis of that data and what you just described, Brett, is something that's really exciting. Scott, is there an area that you're most impressed with, and is there an area that you think AI workers still need improvement?
Yeah, well, Brett hit on something pretty important there, which is that metadata is, of course, a moat. Data becomes an input and a signal to all these systems. What's happening right now is that we're seeing a proliferation of the large language models, OpenAI and Anthropic and Cohere and Mistral and a whole bunch of others. And they're providing a platform on which you can build your own agents, and you can point them at vector databases and, implement RAG, and you can fine tune them in all kinds of different ways to solve different, very specific problems. But that's not the right answer for a lot of what will be the future use cases that companies really want to go after. In fact, they're very bulky. I mean, think about it. Like if you wanted to, solve a simple task, like if you wanted to, generate an outbound email to a sales prospect, and you just had a little bit of information on the prospect you're sending the email to and the information about the customer, you probably don't need a 2 trillion parameter large language model to do that, right? And so it's a bit like overkill. And so what's happening now is that the advent of small language models, and we can build these systems of extraordinary intelligence and automation. We can build AI workers that run on the edge, that are going to run on your mobile device, that are going to run locally on your laptop, that are going to run very fast and lightweight on our servers and very inexpensively. And so what's going to happen is most companies over time, think about the next couple, 2, 3, 4 years from now, are going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of AI workers. Some of those workers are going to be working with people like us, alongside us. They're going to be working with, interacting with our customers for customer service and sales. They're going to be interacting with our tax firm to, exchange account information or invoices and analyze contracts and so forth. And those AI workers are sometimes going to be very good at that thing that they do, but very bad at other things. We've built so far a lot of AI workers that are pretty good at pretty much everything. These built on these massive, massive horizontal large language models that are not necessary. And quite frankly, it's not going to scale over time. So the answer, I think, to that question is that over time, AI workers get better and better, and they get deeper and more skilled at that thing that they were built to do, but they're going to get worse at all the other things that they weren't designed to do. And so I'll just give an example here that I think will probably hit home. If we've got an AI SDR that get asked to compose a piece of music similar to a Mozart symphony, that thing should say, I'm sorry, that's just not what I do. But I sure as heck am happy to tell you all the reasons why you should buy our product, and let me give you a demo, right? That's kind of where we're heading, but we're not there yet. We're very quickly moving in that direction, though.
So I think in listening to the two of you, it's spurred so many interesting ideas. One of the things that I get asked a lot is advice for companies in terms of what they need to be prioritizing to be ready for this future. In conclusion, and I'll stick with you, Scott, to begin with, what advice would you give for companies who are looking to get into this AI workforce space, and what should they be prioritizing right now?
Yeah, what I would say is don't try to boil the ocean. Right now, we're at this point, I think, in the technology arc for AI, where focus and narrowing of scope is really going to pay off. So as a company, as you start to think about what you really want to achieve as a business, work backwards from those goals. Do you want to increase your sales productivity from 60% to 75%? Do you want to decrease your average handle time in your call center from 5 minutes to 4 minutes? If those are the types of things that you want to do, then you look to implement verticalized solutions that can help you do that. And just as an example, if I'm a construction company and I've got a bunch of highly skilled agents out there interacting, and I'm an international firm, I may be taking hundreds of minutes, if not thousands of minutes of calls per week, trying to solve some problems. And there are going to be generic solutions for all of these problems. There's going to be a generic call center agent. There's going to be a generic sales agent. But like you well know, Robert, the effort in building the best of these agents is all about narrowing its focus. So, just as a plug, Piper, for Qualified, one of the first things that it does is it says, what are we trying to achieve here? Let's narrow down exactly what the topics are that are important. Let's narrow down what our goals are. What do we want to achieve together? And then the AI worker then completely changes its behavior and focuses. And that's why I think if you're a business that's really looking to use AI and AI workers to automate more, don't try to boil the ocean and get AI workers that are trying to solve too much. Just try to find those solutions that go real deep, get very smart, ingest as much metadata and data as they possibly can to train themselves, and just start small, because those small wins will afford you, will earn you the ability to go tackle the next problem. And over time, we're going to have armies of these AI workers that just completely transform our entire business and make us more productive.
Brett, what are your thoughts around advice to companies as they look to prioritize?
Yeah, when I hear the word thousands of AI workers, I get a little worried, but it's fine. What I get worried about is last 10 years, people bought too much software. The average employee in a functional role uses like 5 to 12 pieces of software. And I want to make sure that we don't repeat that. You had mentioned before, Scott, the importance for orchestration, right? And I just see people going crazy with a bunch of workers not being thoughtful, the rest of it, rolling it out. And it's just that now I've got a bunch of software that doesn't talk to each other, a bunch of agents don't talk to each other, a bunch of employees don't talk together. And then people are like, AI doesn't work. I can see that happening. My guidance, most of my guidance is with smaller startups. And what I tell them within the first 10 employees is don't almost ignore all the playbooks of how to go build and run a SaaS company, because they're all sort of predicated in a pre-AI world. And you will go do stuff and you will buy software the way everyone else has done and actually have them sit down and do first principles. And so I say within the first 10 people they hire, I want 1 to 2 people. And they tend not to be people that write Python. You can hire, so there's a reason why Blackstone's hiring a bunch of liberal arts majors. You're looking for, people that are problem solvers, first principle thinkers. And I would have them as part of the leadership team out of the gate, thinking through as we're building each org and each process, what are the core processes we're trying to do here? And where do we think AI will provide the most leverage? And as Scott said, let's start with a couple where it's relatively focused, where we think that this agent can do a better job than a human for this, not a cheaper job. One of the challenges when you use agents a lot, people are always kind of respond weird to the word agent because they're used to bots that run customer service websites that were really bad, right? There was no real intelligence. It was just the FAQ for call deflection. And so it's very interesting. We have to overcome that. And so I always say, I want you to do this better than a human. And I'll give you an example. We write a lot of content for our founders. We hold podcasts. We get speakers, but they never show up and they never read it. So we're sitting on a call. We're like, oh, maybe we should just stop doing this. Why do we do this? And I was like, well, because if they read it or they did it, we would have scale. So I was upset and I was like, forget it. I'm going to create an agent. I'm going to create a digital worker. It was like Wednesday at 3:00. I didn't know I'd do it, but like at 9:00 the next day, I had adjusted all of our content, found something to rip the podcasts. I think I used Chatbase. It's $100. And I'd create Ask Bonfire in 30 minutes. Now I had to train it. Like, it came back and it had an answer, but it didn't have the link to the doc. And I was like, hey, dummy, when I've given you a document where there's a link, please provide it, train. And now that's what I give to the founders. That took me like 30 minutes. But what I did, which was interesting, when I first did it, I grabbed all of our content. But a lot of our content actually was broad. Like we invested in this company and this goal was to be successful for founders. So that we took all the content out that wasn't around advice for founders, and it's pretty damn good. And we did that like 30 minutes. I didn't write any code. And then okay, how do I expose it to people? Well, we put it in our Slack group. Now, they don't ever come to the Slack group. That's a whole separate issue for another day. But that's the opportunity of thinking how to think about it. But I would stay focused. I also think what Scott wrote about is this feels uncomfortable at first. But once you start playing around with it and you start doing it, you realize, oh, wow. And actually your approach to AI and how you think about it changes. And so, but you have to build those wins within your company and the belief. So start with like the high value use cases that are very focused. And then it'll become, just like you said, we don't think about AI as something separate. All software companies are AI. That's kind of the guidance and the approach that I give people. But let me give you an example. And Scott, you'll love this from your Salesforce Service Cloud days. People are like, okay, I've got this agentic interface in my product. Okay, great. Wonderful. And it's helping you use the product, et cetera. I said, if somebody wants to file a bug or log a ticket or has a question, where do they go? Oh, they go to this other tab over here to go interface with that. And I was like, I don't understand. You were just having a conversation in your product with the user. Why wouldn't it just be in there and the user would just ask that? And people go, oh yeah, why wouldn't it be that way? But you have to we have to untrain ourselves in terms of all the shitty ways we used to do stuff and be like, that doesn't make sense. So that's kind of the guidance I give folks.
Well, Brett, Scott, I want to thank you both for your time and your insights. This has been a great event. We're excited to actually host the next set of speakers that are coming on. Thanks again to both of you. Really appreciate the support, and cue out.